Welcome to the Purpose and Profit Club podcast for nonprofit leaders, mission-driven creatives, and social entrepreneurs. Get ready to stop dreaming and start doing. Here, ideas become action. We prioritize purpose and profit. You ready? Let's go. Welcome, Tarzan Kay, to the podcast. I want to take a quick moment and let you introduce yourself, and we're going to dive in.
Great. Well, I'm Tarzan Kay, and I am an email marketer. It's how I make all my money. It's how I've always run my business, almost since day one. I used to be a copywriter for hire, but I found myself niching down into emails and sales pages for primarily personal brands and people selling information products like courses and coaching, things like that. And so that's how I got started. And then I realized I really loved email and also had a talent for email. And so I just started only doing that for clients. And then I started teaching primarily because it allows me to do more email. That's my main job, is writing emails. It's also my favorite part of my job. I get so much joy out of writing my emails, and it's something that that is the number one thing that I want to pass on to my clients, my customers, is this could be the best thing that you do in the week. You can tell stories, you can really connect. I sent an email to my list this week, and just for context, I have a list of about 14,000. To be honest, probably more like 13, because I haven't grown it in a long time. And if you're not growing, you're shrinking. You have your email list. It's just how it works. So let's say I have 13,000, and I sent this email about an experience that I had at a AI summit in Vegas last week. And I had so much fun writing it. It was just
that was an amazing email. Yes.
It was funny. It was funny. It was heartfelt. It was all these things. And I loved writing it. And then it went out on Tuesday, and I probably had 50 replies from my subscribers. And they're not just hey, love this email. They're really, people take the time to connect and talk and start a conversation. And that's what I love about email. It's such an intimate platform. And unlike social media, where people either leave public comments or they leave a DM, which is usually also quite short, email is just different. Yeah. And it can be such a great place of connection. And I hope I can pass that on to your listeners a little today, because if you're scared to do email, or if you think that people are going to get mad at you, I promise it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I love the honesty that you're bringing in just to this intro. And just to give you some context, I can't remember when I purchased your course, Copy Caboose, but I'm going to say a few years ago, maybe 2020 or 2021. I'm not sure. And that course changed the way I thought about myself as a writer. It was, and it was so interesting, because my audience already knows this, but I self-identified as a bad writer for the first 30 years of my life. I went through school, I was fine, but I felt like I was a very unremarkable writer, right? And I ran this agency previous to what I do now. And I threw every bit of writing over the wall to somebody else. I would, if a press release, a bio, a pitch, an email, anything needed to be written, I was well, obviously I can't do that. That's not me. And then as I shut down that agency and moved into coaching, I realized that it's me now. And then there was this disconnect of what is my voice? What do I say? And taking your course, I was oh, I don't have to fit into a box. I don't have to sound like everybody else. Actually, it'd be better if I didn't. And I hadn't had that shift before. So I feel there's a magic to what you do. So I want to just say that there's something there in how you teach it that really, really worked for me. And the other piece I want to give you is that I had never taken a course before that had an audio option. And that changed everything.
Right.
I am a parent. So it's I can pop that in. And I think the way that I retain information is really, it just really works for me in that way. And so that was a game changer too.
Well, there you go. There's my plug for my program.
That's it. Yeah. So So I want to talk about first this idea that I feel like you have been letting your readers in on, is this idea of reinvention. Because as I've known you, I feel like you've been in my world. Like I've been a subscriber to you for a few years now, and there have been some reinventions for Tarzan Kay. And I feel like that self-growth and like that willingness to like unlearn, undo is really interesting to me. It's something that I feel like I'm always trying to do, right? To like evolve and like, what is this next version of me? So can you share with us a bit about some reinvention you've been going through?
Yeah, well, I definitely didn't set out to do this. And if there had been another way, I would have done it another way. But it's a lot of how I'm wired. Like I really love sharing my stories. When I was copywriting for clients, like I noticed very early on that the way people were sharing stories was like after the hard part was over.
Yeah.
And it was really rare that business owners, especially because a lot of my clients were business coaches, so they didn't really want to speak publicly about the things that they themselves were going through, maybe for fear that they would lose credibility or their subscribers would not see them as an authority. But I also felt like it came off a little bit, it just came off a little corporate kind of. And it also left out the most interesting parts. Like what we're taught in my industry, the model is really to tell your rags to riches story. Like I was so broke and I couldn't get, and this was me. Like I have that rags to riches story. However, all the interesting things are the things that happened in between, like all the gritty parts, all the beautiful parts, the funny parts, the sad parts, the unexpected parts, like all of those happen in the middle where things are messy and you're not sure where it's going yet.
I think.
And so I started doing that from very early on.
Yeah. Like we all want to share our wins, right? And we only want to share our wins. I'm thinking of all the nonprofits that only want to share when they met the goal, when the program has the amazing outcome. But it's like there are bumps along the road, and those are where people want to cheer you on and we want to be invited into that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really where you show people your humanity. Like we tried, like we had this big goal. We tried all of these different things. We put all of our love and our effort and spirit into this thing, and it didn't work. And like, this is hard. That's like, I have sent those emails to my subscribers many, many times. And I share my successes too, of course, because that's beautiful. And I want people to know that, you know, I'm succeeding and failing at the same time. But those are like I will say the number one most replied to email ever was last summer when I let most of my team go. So for a bit of background for your listeners, I built up this highly scaled digital course business, and I had a team of employees, and we were doing well, but we were really fighting hard. And in order to keep the thing going, it just required so much of me. And I've been through a divorce in the last 18 months. And in the summer, it got to a point where I was like, I am carrying too many things. I need to put some things down so that I could carry Tarzan, because she needs me right now. Yep. So I let all my employees go, and that was harder for them than for me, no doubt. But that was hard. And I told my email list that I had done this thing, and there was just such a massive outpouring of support, like hundreds of emails, hundreds of invitations to speak on podcasts, talk about scaling back my business. Like, that's scaling back is something that like nobody talks about. And a lot of people are doing, like, especially since the pandemic, like a lot of people have realized maybe they don't want the type of business that they have. maybe because it's not working, or maybe it is working financially, but it's not working personally. So I have kind of developed a reputation for being the sort of person that will talk about things that not a lot of people are talking about. And it's just such a sigh of relief. Like, especially in the last couple of years, like we've been through such a traumatic and like just big experience in human history, like one of the biggest of our lifetime for certain. And, for me to like, it actually is a lot easier for me to write authentically and share from my heart than try and perform as someone who's like doing great, because I do see a lot. I maybe it's a personal shift within myself, because I've filed my divorce papers. It kind of feels like the pandemic is actually ending. So I think there's like sort of a coming back to life right now. But for a long time there, it was like every person that I knew, online and offline, was struggling. And to, like compared to say what you see when you open your Instagram feed, which is, entrepreneurs like me, we're really taught to leverage our leverage beauty and likability and be this like bubbly, like inspirational
and
person.
Revenue and
and revenue and blah, blah, blah. And it's exhausting. It's so exhausting to look at that and to hold yourself to that standard. And, we've just been through this thing in the last couple of years. And I was like, just showing up every week, like I'm also in this with you, and this is hard. And I think that's one reason why I have such great subscriber retention, why people stay around, stick with me for years, because I'm not putting on a show. I'm not putting on a show. And if I don't have to put on a show, then you don't have to either.
So how do you, in those moments, like in that most replied to email, like that takes a lot of bravery though, to like send that email. And I know even for myself, I'm putting myself in those shoes of going, yes, it's 1,000 times easier for me to celebrate the wins than it is the fails, or to say, I don't know, right? Or this is what I'm going through. And that's something I'm constantly, I feel like I'm stair stepping on, right? Of like slowly peeling back the layers of perfection and introducing vulnerability and introducing mistakes, introducing things that I'm going through. But what is it like? How do you find that bravery to go there?
Well, I've been doing this for 7 years, and the emails didn't start what they are now.
Yeah.
And I notice with my students that I've kind of forgotten that it's hard, because it's a muscle, and that is a really strong muscle for me. It's also what I've trained my subscribers to expect from me. So for me, it's hard. It's actually harder to do the opposite. But when you're starting out, like you start slow with, a little bit of story that you want to share, and introduce your subscribers that they're going to start hearing things from you that are a little different, maybe, than what they've heard from you in the past. And you ease into it slowly. And I know from experience, from seeing this like so many times with my students, that like once you see once you're on, once you've sent something that was scary and brave, and you get the replies and the feedback from your subscribers, it becomes a lot less scary. Like I've been through that so many times. Like I'm really excited when I open up the folder of replies, even when I've sent something that I'm not really sure about. So that, and that comes from years of experience, but across the board, like when people send something that is unexpected for their subscribers and it's really brave, or it's just different, like 99 out of 100 replies are like so encouraging. And what does happen though, is that you tend to fixate on the 1 in 100
100%
people who said they don't like it. So it is important to acknowledge like that does happen. That still happens to me sometimes. And in my like for years, that used to be really hard. And I would fixate on like, another common thing is like, my sister unsubscribed from my email list. Like, my best friend, how could she? She's my best friend. It's like, and she's not your customer. So wish her well and let her go.
Yeah.
But it does sting more early on. And like, it's not even about toughening up. It's just like I have learned to receive feedback, and I've learned that like I look for patterns. So if I've sent something and one person doesn't like it and has a point to make, I'll engage with them. But if there's like, 3 people, then I'm like, okay, I probably need to look at this a little closer. And that could be, even over, like, that doesn't necessarily mean 3 replies to the same email, but it's like, if I'm reading my replies and like, there's a bit of a pattern that people are taking issue with this specific thing, then I'm going to go look at it. And when you're starting out, like, you're just more fragile.
Yeah.
And that's just how it is. And now I'm like, I know from experience, I will make mistakes. I will definitely say something I shouldn't have said. I will wish I could have a take back. I will wish I didn't share some story or something. Like, I've done it. This isn't like ancient history. Like, this year I've done it. And I also, like, it's one of my business values is that mistakes are part of the process. I repair and share the lessons when mistakes happen. And that's also a muscle that you can learn. And that's like, I guess that's part of perfectionism, is like thinking you have to do it and you're never going to make a mistake. You will. And that's how you learn. And that's okay, because mistakes are human. They will humanize you to your subscribers. And when I think about my children, like the other day, I was really mad at my kid. I yelled at him. I was mean. And then I said to him, like, I sat him down and said, baby, I'm sorry that I yelled at you. That wasn't right. I was frustrated, and please forgive me. I'll try not to do that again. And I think it's so much more important that my children see me making mistakes and taking ownership of my mistakes than my children having the perfect mother. And it is the same thing as a business leader. Like, those people who are seeing you, like, part of being in leadership is showing that it's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. And this is what repair looks like.
I love that. So I'm hearing that you talk to yourself kindly and you're giving yourself grace. And that also is a muscle, right? That also is something that we all have to work on, because it's like that inner voice can be kind of mean. And when we make mistakes, it can be really, really mean. And it's often like triggered by one shitty response from somebody that you're like, yep, I shouldn't have done that. I should go back to the generic newsletter. I'm never doing this again. Bye. It's like, or there's another way to do it, right? Or it's, the kindness we would extend to our child, the kindness we would extend to other people. Like, and also there is that bit of, like, Brene Brown talks about getting in the arena. You can just not get in the arena, but what fun is that? I'd rather make some mistakes.
Yes. I've quoted that. It's not Churchill, it's someone else. The original quote.
Yeah. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I've quoted that a lot. Yes. Like, before you get mad at me, like, I'm out here doing it. What are you doing?
That's right. That's right. So we're going to shift gears a bit, and we're going to talk about this idea of ethical storytelling. And to give you some context, back in 2020, so really around the social justice movement, I really did an inward kind of looking at how I was showing up personally, how I was showing up professionally, how I was advising my nonprofit clients, and the stories they tell. And one of the things that I used to do was this hero story formula, which is very simple: describe the problem, describe the solution. For nonprofits, make the donor the hero. And I was like, And it was like the first time where I was like, okay, I have had some blind spots. I see that. And I started to go on this journey of like, what is a better way? And what I found immediately was, well, it's not nearly as cut and dry as the hero story formula, right? That has a 1, 2, 3. And I started studying, I started asking questions. I started just being curious. And what I noticed too in the years of being on your list is really this lens of like, what are my values? What are my ethics? And how does that translate to your launches and doing small things like getting rid of timers but still creating urgency? And so I really want to talk about just your idea of ethical storytelling, which I always kind of feel like ethical in air quotes because ethics is subjective. So how do we tell stories that are in integrity and in line with our values? And what does that look like for you? And what are your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, I don't think ethics are subjective. I think that there are professional, and that's why I don't use the word ethics, because ethics is a profession.
Yeah.
Ethicists are studying somewhere and teaching about what's ethical and what's not.
Yeah.
So I prefer to talk about values, my values as a company and as a person, because I do think the personal is political. And I've just been writing a new website. Hopefully it's live by the time your listeners hear this podcast, but something that you often see with companies is like, here's our company values.
Yeah.
That's fine. Like every corporation in Canada has like some diversity statement that they've added to their values, maybe in 2020 when all the white people were freaking out. Yep. Or maybe earlier, but that's a really good example of like, okay, but what does that actually mean? Like, how is that expressed in your business? So in my, in this new iteration of my website, it's like, here is how my value of diversity and inclusion is expressed in my business. Or it's like, something like like that is one of my value statements. It's there somewhere. I don't know what the exact words are, but then there's an example. And just a really simple, practical example would be like, I spend time on the alt text in my emails so that someone who's reading with a screen reader knows, because the way that I use images, like I don't just put a picture of my face so people know they're reading an email from the beautiful Tarzan. Like it'll be chosen and maybe it's silly, maybe it's a GIF, and like I'll take some time to explain what that image is. I don't use AI alt text creators because they suck. So I do that myself. That's one way my value is expressed. And I think storytelling is one of the best ways to really demonstrate what your values are. And I mean, as an example, like I am definitely a feminist. That's part of my identity. Mm-hmm. And I wrote this email that we discussed earlier. I wrote an email about my experience as a woman business owner, like in this room of, these men who were like making really degrading jokes. And like that, in reading that story, you do get a really good sense of what I stand for. Maybe we could probably link to it in the show notes or something.
Yeah.
So that can read this glorious email. However, I don't even remember what the lesson was at the end, but it's like, I'm telling stories that actually, like, I'm not just sometimes I do tell random stories I used to do this a lot more in my early days before I had really laid out, like before I knew more about what my values really were. And my worldview. So you cannot fake this. Like you absolutely can't fake it. So my stories in my early days of business, like there were a lot more anecdotes. There were a lot more just like silly stories of like my trip to Costco, something weird that happened in the parking lot. Those are actually totally fine. Subscribers love those. And not everybody wants to, I mean, we're talking about nonprofit business owners here. So they're fundamentally like very mission driven and more likely to know what their values are and how those play out in their life and business. But I just want to say, like, it can, you know, not every story has to be like attached to like a really important value. However, if you do hold those values, then chances are like they're showing up in your decision making all the time. And I'd never even thought to put those two words side by side, ethical storytelling. But I will say, like, just as an example of something that I don't think is ethical. In my industry, which is, you know, a lot of personal brands teaching personal growth and business development, like what the stories that we tend to hear are a lot of rags to riches stories, a lot of like just very rapid transformation. And then that will be paired with like, but it's not a magic trick and it is going to take time and it's not an overnight fix. But then you hear the story for all the people for whom it was an overnight fix. That creates a lot of confusion. It also keeps people like the reason I actually just heard someone talking about this on a podcast called Indoctrination, which is wonderful. Rachel Bernstein was talking about how when a business owner says to the client, it's going to take time, it's not an overnight thing. Actually, the reason they're doing that is to keep the client for longer. So the client will stay there and keep buying the next offer and the next offer. Like that, in my like unqualified,
it's like a power dynamic.
Ethicist opinion is not ethical.
There's a power dynamic there kind of at play. Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of funny. So like, we hear the word ethics thrown around with storytelling in the nonprofit world because there has been this movement of, you know, I often talk about like, I grew up getting them in the mail, that postcard with a shocking image of a starving child. You know, the ones, they still exist, right? And it's an appeal for a donation, right? And that shit gets your attention and it works for many organizations, historically has worked. And now there's this movement, which is like, wait a second, is that okay? And it starts it starts very far back with, did the parent consent for that photo? Like just down, it was like one layer. Okay. Did the parent consent for the photo? It's like just even that layer, I wonder oftentimes. And then the next layer of that is just that I've been asking and curious is like, isn't there a better way? Like if this postcard mailer can make you $100,000 and you can show me that it has, isn't there another way to make $100,000 with a postcard? I'd like to think there is. And I'd also like to think that there are other generations who are like, I'm not going to give to you because this is very, very shocking. This is often they're using stereotypical language, right? I know that they're trying to just stop the scroll. They're trying to get their audience's attention. It's like, that's their intention. But what are your thoughts on a better way?
Well, Christina, I don't think we've figured that out yet. I really don't. And honestly, like I made more money when I was willing to use more pressure and when I was willing to poke at wounds more and like really, really get people into a painful place and then put this buy button in front of them to make the pain go away. And that is, so I haven't figured that out yet. I think I'm figuring it out though. I'm not hopeless by any means. But I will admit for myself, like the choices that I have made have cost me money, and I'm still figuring it out. I also spent a lot of time really like trying to understand the problem. And I spent a lot of time talking about the problem. People don't really want to talk about the problem or engage with that. They actually just want to know what the solution is and what to do. And it's taken me a long time to get there. And I am seeing now I'm able to talk about, in my business, a very different problem, but
yeah,
I'm able to talk about the problem and the solution in a different way. I'm bringing a different energy to it, and that's making a difference in my sales. However, coming back to your problem with the storytelling, I don't know that we've figured it out yet. Although I do think like I get these really, I haven't thought about this, by the way, until you mentioned, of course, there's ethical storytelling issues in nonprofits, and especially when it's in foreign countries and using images of children in foreign countries. Yes, I struggle to see how consent plays into that. I get these wonderful letters. I think they're good, from Cystic Fibrosis Canada.
Okay.
And they're in the mail, and they're letters. They don't have images, and they're stories of everyday people living with cystic fibrosis. Sometimes it's kids, sometimes it's adults. And definitely the stories of children pull at my heart a little more. But they have like a slogan that they use a lot, or like I guess it's their mission, maybe as an organization. Maybe this is how their mission is summed up, which is make it to 75, and to raise the average lifespan of people living with cystic fibrosis to 75. And that to me feels like a really broad and exciting goal to get behind, rather than like a really gut-wrenching, sad story to save one particular person. And that the difference between those two things is like selling from pain points and selling with a shared vision.
Yeah.
And I really love the idea of a shared vision. And I'm pretty sure that is the solution. And I think this example of cystic fibrosis, like make it to 75, that is a beautiful shared vision that I can get behind. And the other thing is like, that's a vision I can show up for every single day, rather than just like making a one-time donation because my heart hurts with this picture that I saw.
Yes. Okay. So you just stole the ideas from, yes. I was like, okay. So what you're saying makes me think about like the pain point, the wound gets what I call a one and done donor. They're like, this is bad. Here's $100. And it was very transactional. I don't have a connection with your organization. I'm like, stop the bleeding here. Versus a shared vision, that kind of community. Oftentimes donors, supporters, we want to be part of like an actual change in the world. There's a sustainability with that relationship being built. And that I don't think you're getting from the generic postcard in the mail with a shocking image. Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. And I also think like, if I really care about your cause, I actually want to do something more than just give you money.
100%.
So if you can help me get involved in a way that is going to raise money, yes, because that's what you need to keep the thing going. But how can I, as a potential donor, not only raise money, but also like be involved in the mission? And like some practical things I can do. And that is one place where like email marketing, I think, can really do some great work, because before I can help you solve the problem, I need to understand the problem. I need to understand what are we really facing here? Yeah. And if I understand what we're really facing here, I can speak really powerfully about it at the dinner table with my friends. When I meet someone that, has like, is a wealthy person that I know takes on causes, like I know how to talk about it in a powerful way. And just, sending out a quarterly email with like an update on like what your campaigns are, like that's just not going to do it for you. That's not going to get the result you need. But a weekly or a bi-weekly email, bi-weekly's fine, even monthly, bi-weekly's better. But, where you're like, people do need, like, you can bring them in. You can, especially like, this is where storytelling is so powerful, is like, you really can get people invested in the same goals so that they can really be an ally and not just a donor.
And I hear a lot of people in my head going, but they're going to get tired of hearing from us that much, but they don't want to, I don't even know what I would tell them bi-weekly. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, well, people are going to unsubscribe. That's part of being an email marketer. However, you're going to lose people, probably more people, if you only send an email quarterly. Like if you only send an email quarterly, your deliverability is going to really suck because people's inboxes, like you're not training people's inboxes to actually open and read your emails. So just, that's one thing you got to know, like you will lose people. That's how it works. So when you're doing email marketing, you want to always be adding people because you're always letting people go. Yep. And another thing to know is like your first emails, like don't look at your unsubscribe rate, because if they're not used to hearing from you and suddenly they're hearing from you regularly, like, yes, there will be high unsubscribes at the beginning and your emails, like they might not be that good. Like it's going to be B- work, and that's totally okay, because the only way to get better at it is by doing it. And also another cool thing that happens is when you're engaging more consistently, you start to see the sorts of things that subscribers actually want to hear from you. You might see like, oh my gosh, when I talk about this topic, there's like a real outpouring of like, thank you for talking about that. Or I get a lot of replies. So you start to learn who your subscribers are. And if you just pay attention to email replies, you will notice and, pay a little bit of attention to your open rate. Is it going up? Is it going down? And really just give yourself permission to experiment. Like if you're not sure what you're going to write about, I mean, the first thing to do with your email list is to tell them things are going to look a little different going forward. You haven't heard from me. Normally I send you this quarterly email where I just ask you for money, and that's not very exciting for either of us. I want to do something that will be interesting. I want to get to know you, and I want you to get to know my organization. So going forward, I'm going to share some stories. I'm going to share some unexpected facts about this cause that we're rallying behind, things like that. So tell them what's coming. And then like, you just have to experiment. Like it's important to, it is really important to have a schedule. Like my email goes out on the second and fourth Wednesday of the month, or like it goes out every Wednesday. Like put it on the calendar, put it in your project manager. This is a task I do each week. Like honestly, the hardest part probably is just creating the consistency of a weekly email. Yeah. Once you've got that down, things go, it's like learning to ride a bike. You're like, oh, I fell over. Oh, damn, I hurt my knee. And eventually you're like, woo, this is so easy.
I love that. So I love this idea of just letting yourself or framing the conversation with your subscribers as, hey, things are going to change a little bit around here. Sometimes it's reminding me of like going into a discovery call, going into a funder meeting, anything where you might even feel a little bit nervous. I sometimes tell my client, like, just tell them, hey, I'm a little nervous. I'm about to pitch you. Like, tell the thing, like say the thing, instead of it just cuts the tension of like, hey, things are going to be a little bit different around here. I'm going to start sending you some more emails. It cuts the tension. The other thing I want to touch on, because you've talked about it throughout this entire conversation, and I learned from you, is the most important email metric, I believe, which is the responses, the replies, right? You've talked about the importance of that. And that's something that we don't hear a lot about, at least in my world, in email marketing. So what are some ways that people, I mean, I would imagine you're kind of getting replies at this point just without asking, yeah? But what are some ways we can prompt replies? ask for replies?
Yeah, well, you can ask questions. That's the best thing. Like anytime you are like, okay, how do I say this? There is a certain amount of like signal strength. I think of it as signal strength of your emails is like the strength of the message. The stronger it is, the more you really stand for something in a powerful way. Mm-hmm. And you can speak about what you stand for without speaking about what you stand against. Like, you don't have to be polarizing, but the more you really stand for something and make a clear statement about what you believe, like that does, those types of emails generate a lot of replies on their own. There'll be people who are like, oh my God, somebody said it. Thank you. Me too. And then also people that are like, I disagree. And here's why. And those conversations can be really, really fruitful. Like you will train your subscribers. Like my subscribers know they can email, hit reply and tell me like, I disagree. I don't like what you said. And I will engage with them. So they do that. And that's because I've trained them. They know. Yeah. So that's one way. Second way, really asking questions. Asking questions like, what do you think about this issue? How have you solved this problem? The more specific the question is, the better. And I'll just say, like in my industry, like we're solving, like, let's say it's me in the email. I'm solving people's email marketing problems. So a specific question with a very clear answer someone doesn't have to think about very much could be, what's your biggest struggle when it comes to sending a weekly email? And it's pretty easy to be like, oh, I never know what to say. Or like, oh, I'm still not sure I have the right email service provider. Oh, I'm really scared people are going to unsubscribe, right? The more high level, the more broad it is. It's like, you know, what are your thoughts on the future of AI technology in the digital course creation industry? Like, that's like, nobody's going to reply to that. I'm like, I don't know. I'm scared too.
Yes.
Like, I don't have thoughts on that. So that's a mistake that I see people make with their questions, that they're too broad, or like even something like, what's your hopes and dreams for like blah, blah, blah. That's way too high level. Like
it's making me think of like, what are you working on or something? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Like, what did you eat for breakfast this morning? Not that I'm recommending that in an email, but that's how easy it should be. Like, oh, it's this. Yes. Oh, I had a green smoothie.
Yes. Not too broad. I have said before, I'm thinking of one where I'm like, it's some flavor of what are you up to? What's on your mind? Too broad. Let's drill down. Yeah.
Yeah. The question could also be, are you this or that? Like, are you this type of person or that type of person? And they can hit reply and say, cool. And every so often you'll hit on something that you get so many replies and you're like, oh, people love to talk about this. And then you lean in a little more.
Oh, we have to shout out my friend Sarah, who writes these great monthly newsletters. And at the end, it's always a survey, and it's the craziest questions. You know, would you rather, are you a dog, cat, or a dog person or a cat person? But it's these crazy other, ways of like, would you rather live in the country? Would you rather live in the city? And I can't help every time. I'm like, vote. And then I want to see the results for the next one of where everybody landed on these fictitious things. So yes, great example. Okay. Do we have a minute to talk about, I'd love to hear you weigh in on AI in writing, because it's been all over the place. And I am somebody who at first was like, nope, I don't want to, no AI in writing. It's all going to be just me writing. And then I was like, well, this might be a little helpful, Christina. Let's see where AI can help you in your writing. So what do you think about?
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited. I think this is an incredible tool that people can use to write, especially for those who think that they're not a good writer. Like, just such like, so the first thing you have to know is the quality of the output is only as good as the quality of the prompt. So it's not like you can't get around, like you still have to learn. Yeah. So if your writing's not good, like plugging it into ChatGPT and saying, make this better is not going to make it better. Yeah. However, once you start playing with it, and I'm so new, like not qualified to answer this question, but almost nobody is.
Right.
So that's another thing to keep in mind is like, nobody knows what they're doing. This tool is like 100 million times more powerful than anybody thinks it is. And the applications we're using it for are almost ridiculous, but here we are. So I'm using, I just actually used it yesterday because I wanted it to like write some jokes for me. GPT-4 is actually quite good at writing jokes. It's also really good at storytelling. If you like give it a character, give it a problem, and ask it to tell a story, it is very good at producing stories. I use it sometimes to help me with subject lines. I might tell something about what the email is about. Naming things, that's like a wonder. Like that is one thing as a writer I have always been bad at. I just can't seem to come up with good names.
Like names for what?
Like names for programs, names for offers, names for
I have I love mastermind this tip.
In the summer. Like, I don't know what I'm going to name it, but I know I'm going to go to ChatGPT and ask it for a name. But you really do need to practice the prompts because there's what's it called? Anyway, there's basically there's single shot prompting and multi-shot prompting. I don't know if that's the actual word, but single shot prompting is the way a lot of people are using ChatGPT. Just like go, and I do that a lot. If I'm like I just asked it, like, when should I put echinacea in the ground in Southern Ontario? And that's perfect. That only needs a single shot prompt. However, all copywriting is a multi-shot prompting experience.
Yeah.
So, you could start with a little bit about who your customer is, who your donors are, what is the problem that you solve? And then, I actually can only talk about this as a marketer. So let me say what I would do as a marketer. You are an online business owner. I'm telling this to ChatGPT. You're an online business owner who hasn't done much email marketing, but you've created an online course. And now you realize you have to get started with email marketing, but you're really scared. Please list out 10 possible fears that you have about email marketing. Okay, I've got 10 possible fears. Okay, great. Now could you please use more specific and vivid details about problems number 2 and 4? Okay, great. So now we're like iterating with what we have and turning it into something. And then the final prompt, there might be a few things in between, but the final prompt might be like, okay, now write me a sales page. That would actually be too much, but like write me an email to that person asking, like sharing some things about this. I'm not even that great at prompting myself.
No, this is good. It's making me think of how to build a sales page where you just need some bullets of like befores and afters and things like that. Yeah. And then I'll translate it for nonprofits. This would be perfect for really even a programs page, a asset you're giving out, a fundraising appeal. You could use it if you ever need. You're like, here's some program stats. You're like, but I don't know what I'm doing with this. And engaging with it that way to help really build out the story would be really helpful. Yeah.
Yes. I use it like a writing assistant. Exactly. And it is really important to know that you have to fact check.
That's right.
It is not going to give you facts. In fact, it's going to tell you many wrong things. Yep. So you have to fact check, but just like in terms of writing things in an interesting way with like puns and humor and showing empathy and adding stories, like it's just a really great tool to play with. And I think probably even more so if you're not a great writer, to just go there and ask it to help you.
I love that. Thank you. All right. Last question for you. This is what we ask every guest, which is the Purpose and Profit Club podcast. So I like to think about this idea of thoughts that you like to think on purpose. So for some people, this may be an affirmation, a mantra, something they just believe, something that is, a guiding post for them. So do you have a thought you like to think on purpose to share with our audience?
Well, yeah. because we're just talking about, this is literally the only thought I'm trying to program into my brain right now, because I don't normally do that type of thing. But I like, AI is really disrupting marketing in a major way, and it's moving very fast, and it's like, can be a bit dysregulating and scary. And I do tell myself a lot, Tarzan, you're not going to get left behind. And I come back to that. I've written it down in several places. I also listen to the part of, like, I'm countering another voice that says, work harder because you're going to get left behind. And that, I honor that part of myself too.
Yep. So
I remind myself, in Tarzan, you're not going to get left behind. And also, like, look at the things that you're doing in order to stay on top of this. Because I think it can be dangerous to try and paint over something that wants your attention with like a more positive thought.
Yep.
So
yep.
I won't get left behind, and because these are the actions that I'm taking.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I love that. And it goes back to earlier, we were talking about your bravery, and it's, you talk to yourself in a kind way. You give yourself grace and you honor the part of you that's feeling that, right? Versus like smushing a new thought on top of it. So that's
I have some smushy thoughts too.
We all do.
Yeah.
We all do. Awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation and being on the podcast.
Thank you, Christina.
If you ask me, everyone should have a coach, especially you. I want to invite you to schedule a free discovery call with me. Go to splendidatl.com/contact. You'll see my calendar there. Book a call with me. You'll learn about my smart growth method, where we can grow your business or organization sustainably with ease and massive impact. Think you've reached out to everyone in your network? Are you out of ideas to get noticed and get funded? I hear you. That's why I'm giving you a chance to steal my prospect list. Yes, you can generate leads for your nonprofit or impact-driven business. Grab my mini training and list delivered to your inbox instantly. Go to splendidcourses.com/prospect.